Hi, welcome back to Science 1206, the Chemical Reactions Unit. I'm Miss Ledwell, and in this video, we'll talk about how to write formulas for ionic compounds containing polyatomic ions. Let's get started. Writing chemical formulas for ionic compounds with polyatomic ions is similar to binary ionic compounds, which we've already covered. Differences include you will need to reference a table to find the charge of the polyatomic ion, and if multiple polyatomic ions are needed, use brackets to enclose the ion and place a subscript after the brackets to indicate the number of ions. For example, for copper-2 acetate, you'll notice that the acetate is in brackets with the subscript 2. The subscript 2 after the bracket indicates there are 2 acetate ions in this compound. Let's look at some examples. Our first example asks us to write the formula for aluminum sulfate. The first thing we'll do is write the cation, aluminum, which has a charge of +3. We can find out the charge of aluminum by looking at the periodic table with ionic charges listed. Next, we'll name the polyatomic ion. To determine the formula for the polyatomic ion, you will refer to the table of ions. That will give you the formula and the charge of sulfate. Now we can use the crisscross method to balance the charges. The number from one ion becomes the subscript for the other ion, and vice versa. We'll write down our 2 ions, so we have aluminum and sulfate, and then we take the charge on aluminum and we place it underneath sulfate. That's going to become the subscript for sulfate. Then we take the charge for sulfate and write it underneath aluminum, and that's going to become the subscript for aluminum. So aluminum is going to have a subscript of 2, and sulfate is going to have a subscript of 3, and we need to remember to put our polyatomic ion in brackets. So we're going to have brackets around SO4 before we add the subscript 3. So our formula is going to look like this. The formula for aluminum sulfate is Al2 in brackets SO4 with a subscript 3. Notice the brackets around the sulfate since there's more than one, and the subscript 3 indicates that there are 3 sulfate ions in this compound. Our next example asks us to write the formula for ammonium sulfide. Ammonium is the only example you will see where the cation is a polyatomic ion, and it's the first in the chemical formula. Refer to the table of ions to determine the formula and charge of ammonium, which is NH4 with a positive charge. Sulfide then is our anion, and it has the chemical symbol S, and elements of group 16, like sulfur, have a charge of -2. Next, we can use the crisscross method to balance the charges. The number from one ion becomes the subscript for the other ion, and vice versa. Remember that if the number is 1, no subscript is needed. So we'll write down our 2 ions. We have NH4 positive and S2 negative. We take the charge on this ion and we move it underneath the other ion. So the positive 1 is going to go underneath sulfide, and the charge of sulfide, which is -2, is going to go underneath ammonium. And now these are going to become the subscripts in the formula. One thing to remember is if the charge is 1, we don't write subscript 1. So in this case, underneath sulfur, we have the positive sign. We don't need to write a 1 here. So let's write our formula. The formula for ammonium sulfide is NH4 in brackets with subscript 2, and then S for sulfide. Notice the brackets around ammonium since there is more than one, and the subscript 2 is there to indicate that there are 2 ammonium ions in this formula. Let's do another example. In this example, we're going to have a multivalent transition metal. So we're going to write the formula for lead-2 nitrate. The first thing we'll do is write the ion for lead-2, and the Roman numeral 2 in the formula tells me that the charge is +2. Then we'll write the formula for nitrate, which is NO3 negative, and we get the formula for nitrate by looking up the word nitrate on the table of polyatomic ions. Next, we can use the crisscross method like we did before to balance the charges. So the number from one ion becomes the subscript for the other, and vice versa. Remember that if the number ends up being 1, no subscript is needed. We're going to write down our ions again. We have lead with a positive 2 charge and nitrate, NO3, with a negative charge. Next, we'll take the charge on lead, which is positive 2, and write it underneath nitrate. And we'll take the charge on nitrate and write it underneath lead. So we've got the positive 2 going underneath nitrate and the negative 1 charge going underneath lead. The negative charge is negative 1, so we don't need a subscript in the case of 1. So now we'll write our formula. We know our subscripts. We have the formula for lead 2 nitrate is Pb in brackets NO3 2. Notice the brackets around nitrate since there is more than one, and the subscript 2 here indicates that there are 2 nitrate ions in this formula. Now that we've gone through some examples together, it's time for you to give it a try. So pause this video, grab a pencil and some paper, or you can open up a blank document if you wish on your electronic device. Number your paper or your document from 1 to 10. And as I reveal each compound in the table, write down what you think the name of the compound is, and then I will show you the correct answer one by one. After you've numbered your paper or document, please resume this video. All right, ready to practice writing the formulas for some compounds. Our first compound is sodium nitrate. And our formula is NaNO3. Our next example is strontium carbonate. Our formula is SrCO3. Next, we have copper 2 sulfate. Our formula is CuSO4. Our fourth example is silver nitrate. And we have AgNO3. Next, we have lead 2 chromate. Our formula is Pb in brackets. We have CrO4, all with a subscript of 2. Next, we have calcium nitrate, CaNO3 with a subscript of 2, silver carbonate, Ag2CO3, cesium sulfite, Cs2SO3, zinc phosphate, Zn3PO4 with a subscript of 2, and aluminum sulfate. Al2 in brackets, we have SO4 with a subscript of 3. How did you do with practicing writing the formulas? If you're having any difficulty, go back and rewatch the examples in our instructional video. Now it's time to review. Complete the learning activities in Brightspace to get some more practice with writing formulas and naming compounds containing polyatomic ions.